If you don't know, this is a little housekeeping business, but if you don't know, this was Mikey Dela Cruz's last Sunday with us as our worship leader. Yeah, boo, I agree. And, occasionally over the course of the life of a church, from time to time, like you see people come in and you love them, and they do a great work, and then they go and you feel like, it was time. It was time, but then there are people who come into the life of the church and they serve and they do a good thing, and then it's time for them to go, and you're like, it doesn't feel good. It's not time. Mikey's one of those people for us. It just, we love Mikey Dela Cruz. We love what he's done for us in worship. Over the last several years, we've come to love the way he leads us. We've come to love his style. We've come to appreciate his humor, kind of, and. It's almost like having our own personal Jack Johnson. The guy's a stud. We just love him. But beyond that, we love his heart. And, Mikey and I have talked a lot of times, and I've just consistently said to him, Mikey, your job is to put your arm around people's shoulder and gently lead them to Jesus. Don't demean us for not knowing Christ like you do. Don't demean us for not knowing the worship songs. Don't demean us for not doing a particular body movement while we're worshiping, But gently lead us to Jesus. And I think Mikey's done an incredible job with that. And so what I want to do is, Mikey, I just want to invite you up front because I want you to see the church that loves you. So come on up. And as a church, we have a gift for you, and we wanted to just tell you that we absolutely adore you. We love you. We appreciate your service very, very much, and our heart is with you. And at any point when you come back from the West, the wild, wild West, you're always welcome in our church. We love you, sir. God bless you. Look up there, man. Look up there. I'll tell you a funny story about Mikey. When we first came here, he had one child, and I think at that point we had five, maybe. We have six now, and Mike is like, I could never have that many kids. I said, dude, I'll bet you a stake that within 3 years, was it 3 years, Mikey, or was it 2 years? Was it within 3 years you'll have another kid? And he's like, no. I'm like, I'll bet a stake. Well, I got a stake, and now he has two amazing, amazing, beautiful children and his wonderful wife, and they're moving out to Arizona. And we're just real proud of what God has done, Mikey. To watch you evolve as a man, as a leader, has been an amazing thing, and we believe the best is yet to come, to use the old cliche. So God bless you, sir, very, very much. Now, just to continue this note real quick, and then we'll get into our conversation this morning. Some of you will wonder naturally what happens next. Well, we're putting together a revolution. The word fails me. Thank you. Rotation. We're putting together a revolution. Are you in? Right? Yeah. We're putting together a rotation of worship leaders. And so what we're going to do is next weekend, we're going to have a gentleman named Casey Brown with us who's going to lead us in worship. And I'm going to introduce Casey to you on Facebook this week. So if you're not a fan of if you haven't checked out our Facebook page, do it. Facebook.com/MyChurch180. We're going to introduce Casey through Facebook. He'll be here next week. I promise you, when you'll see him, you'll never forget him. Okay? He's going to be a great experience for us. We're looking forward to that. So thank you guys for all being here today. It's going to be a good day. If you don't know, we started last week a conversation called How to Stay in Love. And the premise behind this whole conversation is simply this. I need my clicker. The premise behind the whole conversation is simply this. I believe that it's absolutely possible to stay in love with one person for half a century or more. All right? I believe that it's absolutely possible to stay in love and live with and enjoy one person for half a century or more. Does that intrigue anyone? Are you interested in that? Now, I believe that, first of all, because I've seen it done, all right? Now, if the truth is, the percentages say it's almost impossible for it to happen, but I've seen it done enough to believe that it can happen. And I think once you hit the half a century mark, you're like, well, what am I going to do? If you're not madly in love at that point, you're like, well, I've done it this long, I might as well stay, right? But the truth is, everybody I know that's hit the half century mark is like, man, I can't do life without her. I can't do life without him. And our rock solid conviction is that anybody can experience this, how to stay in love. And so that's why we're teaching this whole series. Now, I actually what I want to do is I just want to cut to the chase. And I want to show you something. Gentlemen, this is for you. I want to show you something that if you'll get this down pat, you will stay married forever. You ready for this? This is good. Are you ready? Yeah. Ladies, are you ready for him to see this? Yeah. Okay, this is what it is right here. I'm just going to tell you right now, fellas, this is an old dude. He's been married a while, right? If he gets it, no, the truth is, we joke sometimes about that, but I will tell you this in all seriousness, that I have found, my experience has been that actually when I listen to my bride, God often does whisper through her. And sometimes he speaks with louder volumes than a whisper through her, but he does often. Right, he does often communicate. In fact, yesterday, if you don't know who Stacey Jones is, he's like one of the guys in our church that he's a big personality and just a wonderful person. But his go-to line is like, "I'm going to punch you in the throat." Like, if you haven't been told that line in our church yet, first of all, I'm sorry. If you have, I'm sorry. So Sherry and I were talking the other day, and I said something. Apparently, I was off color or something because her comeback was, "I'm going to punch you in the throat." Wow. So I let Stacey know that her and he are no longer allowed to associate because it's not a good thing. But I say all that to say, fellas, I would just say this to you. It's amazing what God will say to us through our brides if we'll listen and if we'll be humble enough to receive. Oftentimes, God will speak to us through our wives. Now, that's just a bonus. That's not where we're going today, okay? Let's move on. So this is what we said last week. Last week, we said that love is a great idea followed by a lot of hard work. Right. You believe that? Yes. So, if you don't believe it, it's because you're still just in the initial phase. We said last week, when you first fall in love, everything is good, right? I mean, she is the perfect driver, right? And his socks on the floor, they're special, right? It's just, when you first fall in love, everything is good, right? It's okay that he wears that shirt 2 days in a row, right? I mean, you could just go on and on. When you first fall in love, everything is wonderful. But then life happens, right? And we talked a little bit about this. Sometimes life brings with it things called kids, right? And you get busy and you get distracted, and before long, you're not paying attention to love and you're not doing the work of love. And one day you realize, it's a little different than it used to be. Things have changed a little bit. And at that point in your marriage or in that point in your love, you have a decision to make. Am I going to do the hard work to stay in love, or am I going to let this thing go 50 to 60% of other marriages in our culture? What am I going to do? You have a really big decision to make. Now, we said last week, if you're at that place and you say, love is a great idea and I want to be in love, but I realize that it's kind of lost its edge and it's kind of getting cool and I don't know what to do. We said, well, look, there's 4 action steps that we're going to challenge you through a whole way through this series to do. If you don't know what to do, this is 4 things we're going to encourage you to do consistently. Number 1, schedule a weekend away. And let me just tell you, if you have kids, you can't take kids because kids will kill intimacy. Can I get a witness? Amen. Right. Kids will I love kids to death. In fact, kids often are the result of intimacy, but they will absolutely destroy your time. All right. So I heard a guy say the best advice I've ever heard. He said, you got to take 2 vacations. Take one with the kids and take one without the kids. Is that good? So listen, if your relationship is in trouble, the first thing we're as a church encouraging you to do, take some time away with no kids. Number 2 thing we're challenging you to do. You say, well, I can't afford to take any time away. Get a book and read it together. We've recommended 3 books. I've read them all. Wonderful books. They're in the back. You can buy them. We're not making any money on these books. We're selling them for what the bookstore sells them. We have an agreement with the bookstore. There's no taxes. I encourage you, buy one of those books. Read it together. It's work. I don't like to read. Right. Do you like being in love? Do the work, all right? So you say, well, I don't like to read or, whatever. Okay, don't do that. Then how about this? Schedule an appointment with a counselor. Do the work. And we've recommended 2. I've done my legwork on these, and I'm happy to recommend. There's 2 counselors in the back. If you'll go see as you're walking out, there's a little cove back there. There's information back there on both of these, Dwayne Bond and Shannon Nord. I highly recommend both of them. Schedule an appointment. Have them help you navigate some of this marriage stuff, all right? Some of this love stuff. And the 4th thing we're encouraging you to do is get baptized together as a couple. And basically what you're doing there is publicly saying to everyone, God, the church, your family, your friends, we're inviting God to be a strong presence in this relationship. We're going to make that decision. We're going public with it. I would encourage you to do. So those are 4 things. If you don't know how to do the hard work, do those things. Now, so this is where we started last week. Love is a great idea, followed by a lot of hard work. So a few years ago, I picked up a book by a gentleman named John Gottman. It's an incredible book. In fact, a lot of works on marriage that you'll read will actually reference this book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail. And in this book, he said something like this. He said, every marriage demands an effort to keep it on the right track. In other words, it's not like we get married and then it's happily ever after, right? We get married, we fall in love, and then we got to keep making an effort. We got to keep working on it and keep working on it and keep working on it. And listen, people that are married 50 plus years, guess what they're doing? Working on it. Right. I mean, it's just what it requires, okay? It's like a body. It's like a car. You don't change the oil once and it's done forever. You change it, you drive, you change it, you drive, you change it, you drive. You got to work on it, work on it, work on it. All right, so we talked about that. Now, in this book, Gottman makes the claim that he can predict with 94% accuracy whether or not a couple's going to get divorced. That's pretty audacious. But that's the claim he makes, that he can present with 94% accuracy whether or not a couple will actually get a divorce. He wrote this book in 1994. After 20 plus years of a track record, that percentage is still pretty close to spot on. And what he said was, look, there's a number of factors that actually precede an actual divorce, but 4 actions that consistently precede a divorce or a dissolution of love are these. He calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Now, let me just talk to you about them real quick, and if you're interested, you can go online, you do your own research, you can get this book, you can read about it there, but let me just explain quickly what these 4 things look like. And as I'm talking about them, what I want you to do is do a self-evaluation and say, are these characteristics present in my marriage? Do I do these things? Now, here's what I want to do today. Let's make a deal. Let's not ask this question. Does my spouse do these things? That's not fair, okay? Deal? So as we talk, the question we're asking is, do I do any of these things? And we're going to talk about it a little bit, all right? Criticism. This is what it says criticism is. It's when you attack your partner's personality or character rather than the situation at hand. And so it'd be something like this. Like, rather than saying, hey, I noticed you didn't take the trash out. That kind of bothers me, right? That would be a complaint, which is perfectly acceptable. So what Gottman says, the criticism would be, you didn't take the trash out, you lazy bum. Criticism. See? He says, people who tend to criticize will use words like this. You always do that. Like, you never take out the trash. You're the type of person who like, you try to act like you're busy so that I don't ask you to do anything, but then as soon as I'm gone, you turn on Netflix and you don't take out the trash. Criticism. Why are you so lazy? Right? Criticism. By the way, this is backed up by research, so females do not hate me for this. Women are more inclined to do this. Men do not say amen or anything right now. Right? Women are more inclined, he says, to criticize. Now, let me just be honest. Men do this too. But generally, he says that women have a tendency to do this more, to criticize, to attack, rather than talking about a situation, to attack the personality or the character of their spouse. Now, the next one he talks about is contempt. And that basically happens when you attack your partner's sense of self with the intention of insulting them or psychologically abusing them. In other words, disrespecting them, wide open disrespect. So this would include like name calling, insults, hostile humor, like using words like, the B word. You know what that means, right? Okay. Like wimp, fat, stupid, ugly, slob, lazy, all those, like when you're using sarcasm or you're mocking them, that is what he calls contempt. And he's like, look, that's a really bad thing. And if that is consistently present in your relationship, you're in trouble. All right? If you're criticizing and you speak to them with contempt, he said body language or tone of voice also display contempt. Things like sneering or rolling your eyes, curling your upper lip, all those things, contempt. He said, if this is a part of your relationship, you're in trouble. The third one he talks about is defensiveness. Now, this is honestly understandable. If someone's attacking you verbally, right, it makes sense to kind of like go into defense mode. But he said, listen, this is absolutely destructive to a relationship. If when you're being talked to or you're on the receiving end of a complaint or even on the receiving end of a criticism, if immediately your go-to is defensiveness, like making excuses, or things like, it's not really my fault. If you would have done this, then I would have, right? On and on and on. He says defensiveness. If you're a defensive person, or if there's defensiveness in your marriage, it's in trouble. Because you really can't have an honest conversation with someone who's defensive, right? And the fourth one then he said is stonewalling. And that basically, he said, is withdrawing from the relationship as a way to avoid conflict. In other words, he said, this is, and by the way, he said 85% of stonewalling is done by men. Ladies, you can go ahead and say amen, right? No, you have to be nice, okay. Like, we do this, guys, right? Like, she's like, why don't you take out the garbage, and why don't you do this? And pretty quickly it becomes, yip, yip. Like, that's really what we hear, isn't it? Like, it just kind of goes into a, like, and we're just like in another world. Am I in trouble? Am I in trouble? All right, okay. So, but basically what happens is when we stonewall, we kind of remove ourselves. Like, we may be in the room, but we're a million miles away up here. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, right? All right. He said, look, this is where we go into a stony silence. It's where, like, in the middle of a conversation, we'll say, She'll say, are you listening? Yeah. Removing ourselves physically, like even leaving a room or giving her the silent treatment. He said, look, these are the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? These behaviors, when they're consistently present in a relationship, will destroy the relationship. And actually, if they're consistently present over an extended period of time, the high likelihood is that this marriage doesn't make it. Now, I look at these behaviors, and there's a couple things I want to say about them. Number one, these things are not immediately obvious in a relationship. Like, when you begin a relationship, it's not like, oh, Mom, I found the perfect woman. She criticizes me. It's amazing. Mom, I found the perfect guy. He stonewalls every time I talk. Right? So these things are not immediately obvious in a relationship. Like, when you first start the relationship, it's good. He listens. He leans across the table. When you first start the relationship, she doesn't criticize anything. He never rolls his eyes. He never says off-color things, mean things. So this stuff is not immediately obvious. Now, when you get through the initial phase of that relationship, these things begin to appear, and that brings me to the second thing about these behaviors. They're not healthy. I mean, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? Like, no one looks at these and says, man, I'd like to act like that. Like, I would like to be the guy that criticizes all the time. No one says that about any of these behaviors. No one says, I would love to be a person who speaks to my spouse with contempt. And no one says, I would love to have a husband who stonewalls. Nobody says, I would love to be in a relationship in which defensiveness and criticism were the benchmarks of our marriage. Why? Because it's patently obvious these are not healthy behaviors. Now, because they're not healthy behaviors, I think it's fairly obvious to say that healthy, mature people who have healthy hearts and healthy attitudes and a healthy perspective on a relationship don't act like this. Healthy people don't, but hurting people do. And this is what we always like to say around here. We like to say that hurting people hurt people and live in hurting relationships. Hurting people who have hurt on the inside will project that hurt on the outside, and they will forever live in hurting relationships. It's amazing to me if you just stop and you just watch people and you listen to their interactions and you watch their body language. Happy couples don't do those things, but couples whose homes are filled with hurt genuinely consist of two people who have hurting hearts. Now, let me go on and explain a little bit like this. A lot of guys particularly, guys, let me just talk to you. Every guy awake, you ready? A lot of guys particularly would not walk around saying, I'm hurting, right? Like guys are not going to be like, oh, my heart hurts. What we would say is like, I got some anger, right? This is something that most hurt in our life goes back to this idea of anger. Let me read to you This is a book, Gary Smalley, he wrote a book called Making Love Last Forever. He says this, right up front, he says this: there's a major destroyer of love on the loose. I've found it to be the leading cause of divorce and the single greatest thief of one's love for life. It may already be at work in your life and marriage. This destroyer is forgotten, unresolved anger. Not just the kind that gnaws at one's stomach night after night, but also the type that quietly disappears. At least I used to think it disappeared. And then he says this is really big. When we bury anger inside of us, it's always buried alive. Is that good? When we bury anger inside of us, it's always buried alive. Now, there are some people in this room, I'd bet $1, there's people in this room right now that you've had something in the past that created anger in your heart. And some of you just said, I'm just going to live with this burning fire in my heart. And so you have a burning fire, and unfortunately, everyone with whom you come in contact is burned. Some of you have not adequately dealt with that anger, and as a result, you've pressed it down and pressed it down and pressed it down. Well, I've got something to tell you that's not even really a secret to anyone that knows you. It's not dead. It continues to ding the people that you love. A couple pages later, Gary Smalley says this. He says, anger is actually not a primary feeling, it's a secondary emotion. It arises out of fear, frustration, hurt, or some combination of these three. For example, if someone says something harsh to us, at first we feel hurt and then anger. Is that right? Right? That kind of hurt. Why'd you say that? Right? Okay. When we strip the word anger down to its deepest level, we see a thread that runs through this entire book. This is it. When we strip anger down to its deepest level, this is really important. Here's what we see. Unfulfilled expectations. Frustration is not receiving what we had expected from other people or circumstances. I thought you were going to love me forever. I thought you were always going to be nice. I thought you were always going to brush my hair like you used to do before we went to bed. I thought you were going to do this. But you're not anymore. And so I'm frustrated, which leads to anger. Hurt is when we don't hear the words or receive the actions we expected from other people or from circumstances. And fear is either dreading that which we expect will not come as we wish it to, or expecting that something bad is going to happen. Essentially, he says, look, anger is the result of unmet expectations. But long before Gary Smalley was doing his writing, or John Gottman was doing his writing, there was a line written in the Bible by a guy named Solomon, who happened to be the king of Israel, the second king of Israel, and purportedly one of the wisest men who's ever lived. This is what he said. He wrote a proverb. He said, hope deferred makes the heart sick. This is really, really important. You know what hope deferred means? Unmet expectations. There was something that I hoped for from this relationship, and it didn't happen. There was something that I hoped that you would do, and you didn't do it. There was something that I thought for sure you'd quit. I thought for sure you'd change, and it didn't happen. And the result is a sick heart. Hope deferred. Unmet expectations. A sick heart. Gary Smalley says anger, which drives the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Criticism does not come from a happy heart, does not come from a healthy heart. It comes from a sick heart. Contempt comes from a sick heart. Stonewalling comes from a sick heart. Defensiveness comes from a sick heart, a heart that has had a lifetime or a series of unmet expectations. Let me just say to you right now, please, this is huge. If you're in this room and the love game is not working for you, it very well could be the result of a sick heart. I've had expectations, I've had hopes that did not pan out, and now my heart is broken. I have a sick heart. And as a result, I live with anger and defensiveness and contempt and bitterness and stonewalling. Look, I just turned 40 last year. And some of this stuff, I've read these books before, but I read them when I was 20. And I didn't realize the power of a sick heart. I'm now 40, and I'm working through hope deferred. As I look back over the early years of my life, working through issues with early relationships, with family, etc., all of a sudden I realized there were expectations that I had that were not met. And as a result, my heart became sick. And that sick heart, that's the heart that I brought into this relationship with the wonderful, lovely, and talented Mrs. Peterson. It's that heart that I bring into relationship with everyone, but particularly my bride. I mean, it's almost like this. Imagine like if you and I went out for lunch and you were in a generous mood, you just got your tax refund if you get one of those, right? And you said, Paul, I'm gonna buy you lunch today. I said, well, that's good, all right. So we sit down, we have a conversation, we have a nice time, and we get ready to go, and the waiter brings the bill to you, and you look at it, and it's for $10,000. You're like, what in the world? Yeah, what did you eat? Like $10,000? Man, all we had was burgers, and he had some sushi. Like, that's it. Not $10,000. How does that work? And I look at you and say, yeah, I wanted you to pay for mine, but I also asked them if they would put on your bill the meals of everyone in this restaurant. Like what I want you to do is I want you to pay for my meal and the meals of everyone else in this restaurant. You'd be like, that's not right, man. That's not good at all. But listen, we do this all the time. We go into relationships with sick hearts, and we ask the people with whom we're in relationship to pay the bill for things that other people have done. For instance, in your past, maybe your father or a sibling or an ex-partner or someone has been harsh to you and they've disappointed you and they've broken their heart and they've lied to you and they betrayed you, and as a result, your heart was sick, your heart was broken, and you moved into your next relationship with a broken heart, but you took with you anger and frustration and defensiveness and hurt, and you lived with your guard up, and now you're asking the person with whom you're in a relationship with to pay their bill. Does that make sense? And love cannot be sustained that way. People with sick hearts, gang, listen, this is huge. People with sick hearts are asking the people with whom they're in a relationship to pay the bill for things other people have done. Now, if you're going to be in a relationship, if you're going to experience love that lasts forever, this is important. You're going to have some heart work done. Because sick hearts create unhealthy relationships. People who have sick hearts are not going to live in love forever. They're going to struggle and stagger and bounce around. So we've said early on that love requires a lot of work. And here's what I'm realizing. The work is usually not on the person on the other side of the table. The work is usually on me. So in a love relationship, it's not like, well, my wife needs some help. Or my husband needs some help. The truth is that your sick heart is probably what needs help. And his sick heart or her sick heart is probably what needs help. The truth is this: my angry, my disappointed heart, my frustrated heart has to get better so that I can really love well. In other words, let me say it like this: I must be well to love well. Like, I'm the best gift I can give to my bride. I'm better than a new car in the long run. I'm better than a nice house in the long run. You know, and I know lots of people who live in nice houses, but their love life is terrible. You are the best gift you can give to your spouse, but if your heart is sick, it's not a great gift. So the question we have to wrestle with is this: how do I go about fixing this broken heart? This sick heart inside that makes me function with anger and defensiveness and criticism and contempt and stonewalling. How do I go out fixing this? Again, Solomon writes something that's instructive. He said this. He said, look, guard your heart above all else. It's more important than your money, more important than anything in the world, your heart. for it determines the course of your life. If your heart is sick, your relationships are going to go wrong. Things don't go well for people with sick hearts. Now, here's the thing, guys. The heart we're talking about is obviously not your physical heart, right? It's a spiritual thing. Like the heart that we're talking about is a spiritual thing. And in other words, it can't be seen or touched, but it can be felt. Like you listen to, we went to a Winthrop basketball game the other day. And sometimes you listen to commentators and they'll be talking and they'll say things like, he's on the court, but his heart's not there. What's he mean? I mean, clearly his physical heart is working, right? That's why he's running up and down the court. But there's something else. Like his body's on the court, but his heart's not there. And you've seen relationships that work like that. The body's in the house, but the heart's not there. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about a physical heart. We're talking about a spiritual heart. You can't see it. You can't touch it. You can't hear it, but you can feel it, can't you? You've been in conversation with people whose heart's not there. It's like, oh gosh, why am I even talking? But you've also been in relationship and in conversation with people whose heart is there and you're so engaged and you're so fulfilled and this is so good. I could stand up here all day and teach you best practices for marriage. Date your wife. You got to do that, fellas. Do your budget together. Pray together. Have sex regularly and talk about it. 1 Corinthians 7, read that. Eat together. Prioritize your relationship above all other relationships. I mean, those are marriage best practices, and I could talk to you all day about those kind of things. But here's the thing. Trying to do best practices with a sick heart is like trying to eat when you're sick. You ever do that? Like you're like, oh, I know I should eat. My body needs the nutrition. I know I need to eat, but man, I don't feel like eating. Trying to do marriage best practices when your heart is sick is almost impossible. I would just say that you don't need more things to do. You actually need something done on the inside. And because love is spiritual, I would just say that you might need something spiritual to fix your sick heart. Now, Christians are incredibly hopeful people because we believe that our God is a God of love. And we believe, as we read our Bible, that God is all about fixing hearts. He's all about fixing hearts. If you read through the Bible, there's a ton of great marriage best practices. But the most fundamental one is you've got to have your heart fixed because sick hearts don't do relationships well. There are lots of places in the Bible where it talks about God fixing hearts and God rearranging hearts and renovating hearts and renewing hearts, all kinds of stuff. But one of my favorite places is a place where he's having a conversation with a man named Ezekiel, and he's talking about his people, and he said, look, my people have sick hearts. They've made really bad decisions. There have been really bad things that have been done to them. They've been disappointed. They've been frustrated. They've lived in fear. Like they have sick hearts. But if they'll pay attention to me, this is God, if they'll pay attention to me, he says, look what I want to do. I will give them singleness of heart and put a new spirit within them. In other words, listen, people with sick hearts are all over the place. Like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. Angry memory, hurt, try to do better. Angry memory, hurt, try to do better. They're all over the place. God said, if you'll pay attention to me, says God, I will give you a singleness of heart, and I'll put a new spirit within you. I'll take away their stony, stubborn heart and give them a tender, responsive heart. This is God saying, if you'll pay attention to me, I'll fix your heart. Now, here's what we're really looking for. It's a new heart. I mean, it's something on the inside that will help us live healthy on the outside. I mean, if you think about it, we're always looking for something new to help us with our love problems. I mean, think about it. If the love runs out and, what do they say? The honey runs out and the moon goes down, the honeymoon's over, I'm out of here, right? We're always looking for new things. Like, maybe this relationship isn't right. Maybe I need a new relationship. Or maybe I need a new doctor who will help me and write me the right prescription. Or maybe it's some new pills or a new drink, or maybe I need some new friends, or maybe I need some new hobbies. We're always looking for outside things to fix an inside problem. So what would happen if we just said, the heart is an inside thing? I'm going to look for an inside fix. Does that make any sense? See, trying to do new things with an old heart is never going to work. But with a new heart, I can do things like forgive and speak kindly and think clearly and love patiently and work through problems. I could do these things with a new heart. So I read you the sentence that Solomon said. It went like this: hope deferred makes the heart sick. But that wasn't the end of his proverb. He said, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. I believe it is absolutely possible to live in love with one person for half a century or more, but you can't do it with a sick heart. You'll have to have a new heart. And when you do have a new heart, when something happens on the inside to that broken, disappointed, frustrated, angry heart, when something begins to happen to that, this dream of love that lasts, this dream of love that works becomes a reality. And I have seen lots and lots of people navigate through disappointment and anger and frustration and betrayal. They've navigated their way through that. They've found a new heart. They've asked God to help them have a new heart, and it's begun to work. And now, decades later, they're making it. I'm not one tiny bit thinking that they're an exception. I think that's what our God does. Now, let me just say this. I'm not about to say that if you're in marriage trouble or your love is in trouble, you just need to pray more. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, there was a point in my life where I was really struggling with some issues, some anger, some bitterness, and I went to a Christian counselor, and basically his words to me essentially were this: embrace the sovereignty of God and pray more. I'm like, well, dude, that's not helpful. I mean, I believe in that stuff, but help me, right? I'm not saying that the only thing you need to do if your love is in trouble is to pray more, but I am saying this: it might be the first thing you need to do. Because a broken heart with new practices isn't necessarily going to fix the broken heart. We need a new heart change. And the Christian God says this: I'll give you a new heart. I will help you forgive. I'll help you navigate this hurt and disappointment. I'll remove the anger. I will help you love fully, but you're going to have to trust me. You're going to need to invite me in to do this work. Now, some of you live angry. You think you've buried it well, but you haven't. It doesn't die. If you aren't, you will be bitter, and you will be angry, and you will be hard to love, and you will find it hard to love. But it doesn't have to be that way. See, love is a spiritual thing, and there is a spiritual solution. Our God says, I can help, but I need you to let me in. I need you to ask. And so I ought to just say to you this morning as we get ready to wrap it up is, will you ask? You can read a lot of books, and I recommend that you do. But reading books and learning new ideas with a broken heart gets you nowhere for long. It's a new heart. And God says, I can help you. Now, our band is going to come and they're going to lead us in a powerful song about Jesus. Because as Christians, we believe that when we ask Jesus to come into our lives, He actually does, through His Spirit, move into our lives. And He begins to fix things, and He begins to work on our heart. He begins to rearrange things. He helps us forgive. He helps us be patient. He gives us courage to address difficult conversations. He does all of these things for us. And we're going to sing the song that's powerful about Jesus because we believe that's the first place to start. If love has gone dry in your life, it's the first place to start. And allow Him to provide leadership in your life. Allow Him to give guidance to your life. Invite Him in to do this. That's where I would just say the first place to start. And then we can read books together, okay? Now, while we sing, I'm going to encourage you to do this. I want to encourage you to just, in your heart, say to Jesus, I'm there. I have a sick heart. I've had lots of unmet expectations. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm bitter. And I know I can't love well with this heart. I need a new heart. Will you come in and begin to do your thing? And as that happens, we're going to say these words to Jesus. You're the name that can make this happen. You're the powerful one who can do this work in my heart. And that's where we start staying in love forever. Now, if you decide today to do this, here's what I want to ask you to do. I want you to tell somebody. I want you to tell your friend. I want you to tell a pastor. I want you to tell a life group leader. Tell somebody what you've done. Tell them you made a spiritual decision to deal with a spiritual problem today. And then I would encourage you also, if you've done this, to consider going public next week in baptism. And just saying to the church, saying to God, saying to your family, saying to your friends, perhaps even to your spouse, I've invited God into my heart to help me navigate this love thing well. Would you stand with me this morning? We're going to pray, and then we're going to sing a song that gives honor to Jesus. Father, lots of us in this room, God, probably everyone in this room has at some point had a sick heart. At 40 years old, I'm discovering the weight of a sick heart, how unmet expectations, how deferred hopes can be quite large obstacles to overcome. And we bring that hurt with us. We bring that disappointment with us. If we're not careful, Lord, we end up asking the people who we love the most to pay bills for things that other people have done. Forgive us. Give us new hearts. Help us to love fully. Help us to forgive completely. I pray, God, that every single man in this room and every single woman in this room would know a love that lasts forever. In Jesus' name.